Sunday night. Chemical weapons.
He's talking about nerve gas.
A man and his son.
We've definitely got 2 cases of exposure.
The prognosis?
I don't expect him to live more than another week.
The rage.
You've been in this from the beginning. You in the Army.
Now, George C. Scott has 48 hours to exact his revenge.
Don't have anything to lose, a kid.
If he can stay alive that long. George C. Scott, Martin Sheen, Rage. 7 Eastern on the Superstation Sunday night.
You hungry? Huh.
There's something over there. You can't get anywhere. Just down the road away, anytime, any day. What's happening next is where best meets west. Don't bother to pack. There's no turning back. You got a taste for it, just one place for it. You know by the sound, gotta get out of town. You gotta toss it, jump it, bust it, bump it. Taco Bell at the road or make a run for the border. Shake it, snap it, smack it, crack it. Taco Bell at the road or make a run for the border. Hop it, jump it, bust it, bump it. Taco Bell at the road or make a run for the border.
I got an idea.
Taco Bell at the road or make a run for the border.
Steel. Muscle. It takes one to perfect the other. And nobody knows that better than Soloplex. Before you take your Soloplex through its workout stations, we put it through some of our own. We start with raw materials. Use force and resistance, knowledge and skill, effort and technique to create a strong, balanced, and functional work of art. All of which goes to show the way we build Soloplex is a lot like the way you use it. For a free brochure, call anytime.
Beach resorts, cowboys, rock concerts, independent businesses. Life in the U.S.? No. Life in the Soviet Union. Be here when Portrait of the Soviet Union, a revealing Superstation series, continues. This program offers the opportunity to get to know the Soviet people. This is a portrait of the Soviet Union.
Portrait of the Soviet Union continues Sunday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern on the Superstation.
The family, which is the basic building block of civilization, is to be built on love, nurturing, sharing, and working together. But today, with the pressures of society, divorce, and single-parent homes, the structure of the family is changing. Is the time-honored concept of the traditional family disappearing? This week on The World Tomorrow, David Albert.
Today on The World Tomorrow, we're going to take a look at one of the truly great changes that has taken place in our times, the decline of the traditional family. By traditional, I mean a family with a father, mother, and a child or children living together under one roof. But families like that are decreasing in number so rapidly today, we almost need to put them on the endangered species list. Today, we're witnessing the vanishing of the traditional family. A current popular song here in the U.S. is about a young girl who asks her grandpa to tell her about the good old days. It expresses a nostalgic yearning that many of us feel today for the simpler, happier days gone by, where, in the words of this song, families really bowed their heads to pray and daddies really never went away. Here in the United States in the 1980s, as in other places of the world, there have been many expressions of this nostalgia, almost a preoccupation with happier days when families pulled together in good times and bad. What was it about those days that we find so powerfully attractive, that has such a nostalgic appeal? Isn't a big part of it simply families living together, working together, staying together through thick and thin? Moms and dads, brothers and sisters, even grandpas and grandmas, all having a significant and beloved role to play in the family unit. But today that all seems to be changing. Why is it that today such a normal, traditional family seems like a thing of the past, a product of the good old days that are seemingly gone forever? Today instead we hear a lot about divorce, living together without marriage, single parents, latchkey children, missing children, and alternate lifestyles. Alternatives to traditional marriage are thrust at us all the time, on the news, in the movies, TV situation comedies, and the soaps, even by influential political and entertainment personalities, until it all seems quite normal and respectable. But before we become too blasé and accepting of this new state of affairs, we need to ask a few searching questions, such as, is all of this working? Is it having good results? And where is it all heading? In other words, can we build and preserve a stable, successful society based on these novel ways of looking at marriage and the family? We see a lot of evidence coming in that these new arrangements have resulted in problems we've never seen on the same scale before. Without the traditional roles of husband as provider and wife as homemaker, child care has become a difficult issue for the single parent who must somehow fill both roles. Today we hear a lot of concern expressed about latchkey children who come home from school to an empty house and are without much care or supervision until the parent gets home from work. Estimates on how many U.S. children come home to an empty house or apartment vary from a minimum of 2 million to as high as 10 million, which is nearly a fourth of the nation's school-age children. What will be the impact in years to come of millions of children who grew up pretty much on their own? Even today, the alarming rise in teenage pregnancies is attributed in large part to the lack of parental guidance and supervision. Recently, surveys indicate that the girl's home, not the back seat of an automobile as in times past, is the usual site for teen sexual activities. And children with too much time on their hands also often get involved with drugs and other illegal activities. And what kind of families will today's children have who are growing up in these loosely structured, less traditional arrangements? What will they know about families and parenting when it comes their turn? Where is this all leading? I can tell you what the U.S. Census Bureau projects for the United States in the years just ahead, and I think you'll find it rather shocking. Last year, the Census Bureau projected that of the 19 million households likely to be added to American society between 1987 and the year 2000, probably only 3 out of 10 will consist of husband and wife married couples. The rest, according to the Census Bureau, will be single-parent families and couples living together outside of marriage. Think of that. Over 2/3 of the new households will not be married, but either be single parents or simply living together. In other words, we're going to see a far greater trend away from the traditional family in the future when today's children become young adults. These trends will accelerate in the next generation. How will it go for this new majority of households? Well, we can be certain of one thing. Most won't be very well off financially because whether they realize it or not, the single-parent family is cited today as perhaps the greatest cause of poverty in the Western nations. The authors of Single Mothers and Their Children state flatly, families headed by single women with children are the poorest of all major demographic groups regardless of how poverty is measured, and go on to suggest that families headed by single women are creating a new underclass in American society. And Census Bureau statistics tell us that the number of such single-parent families nearly doubled between 1970 and 1985, moving from 12% to 23% of U.S. children. In recent decades, poverty rates for mother-only families have consistently run 4 to 5 times higher than for two-parent families. In Britain, the number of one-parent families headed by a single or divorced woman has also doubled during this same time. So even if we were only to look at the families of the future from an economic standpoint, there would be real cause for concern. The children of these new lifestyles today are likely to be tomorrow's new poor. Most are going to grow up on welfare and live below the poverty level with substandard housing, health care, education, and social development. So the decline of the traditional two-parent marriages, whether by choice or circumstances outside one's control, is going to have far-reaching consequences for the next generation. But again, how did it get to be this way? Whatever happened to the family in the traditional sense of the word? Sometimes it almost seems as if it were the victim of some kind of conspiracy. In the remainder of today's program, let's see what's been happening to the family in recent years by examining 3 kinds of marriages. First, traditional, then modern, and finally, person-centered, each of which works by a different philosophy or approach to marriage and the family. There was a time not so long ago when men and women got married and had pretty clear agreements about their respective roles. Their relationships, though they may have had certain flaws and problems, had a certain staying power through thick and thin. Such marriages, and I'm speaking of traditional marriages now, found the husband as the head of the family with the role of provider or breadwinner. His leadership role was usually clear and unquestioned. Wives function in complementary roles as homemakers, mothers, nurturers, and caregivers for the family unit. Children in the traditional marriage, who were usually desired, were provided and cared for fairly well depending on the strength and resources of the family unit. Now, I shouldn't make the traditional family sound too old-fashioned because I realize many of you viewing this program today grew up in homes such as these, and many still hold up the traditional family as the ideal, especially in rural areas and among various ethnic groups where the roles of husbands and wives have not changed much over the years. The next development and changes in the family, the modern marriage, finds the husband and wife operating more as equals. And then any children they may have are still thought to be under their jointly shared parental authority. But there's another model of marriage rapidly gaining popularity today that is endorsed by many psychologists and backed by law in certain Scandinavian countries. It's called the person-centered family. And in this arrangement, husband, wife, and children are all seen as fully equals. No one has any real authority over the other. It strives to be completely democratic. In this kind of marriage and family, not only is the leadership role of the father diminished in importance, but also that of the parents over the children. Not only is the father no longer the head of the family, but the parents are no longer co-leaders of the family over the children. This is the final step in the reduction or elimination of a central authority and control in the family unit. Here's how one very famous child psychologist, Rudolf Dreikurs, writes of the radically new democratic approach to parenting and family relations. Since democracy implies equality, parents can no longer assume the role of the authority. Authority implies dominance, one individual having power over another. There can be no such dominance among equals. Today, our whole social structure has changed. Children have gained an equal social status with adults, and we no longer enjoy a superior position to them. Our power over them is gone, and they know it, whether we do or not. They no longer recognize us as a superior power. Now, whether you agree with those sentiments or not, they are becoming increasingly accepted today in most Western nations, and many are trying to run their families this way. So we've seen in the last 3 or 4 decades a step-by-step progression in most Western nations from the traditional father as the head of the family model of marriage to the modern 50-50 style of marriage where husband and wife are equals in authority over the children to the so-called person-centered family relationships which are far less structured and try to be far more democratic or open. The logical endpoint of this trend is what we're beginning to see today. People simply doing their own thing, as we say, in or out of marriage, with or without a partner, and without much regard for the next generation. And that's why we're seeing so many new ways of going at family relationships. We've gotten to the point in our society where clearly agreed upon notions about the family have been replaced by the idea that it's all right to go at family relations any way we see fit. But does it really make any difference? Does it matter? Is there any one right way to go about the task of making a family? And are there any wrong ways? Or does it pretty much come out the same no matter how you go about it? Now that's become a very popular idea today. Well, what do you think about it? Do you honestly believe that no matter what marriage and family arrangement you choose for yourself, your partner, and your children, the results will be good for all concerned? If you're in a family as a father, mother, or child, you need to know the answers to those questions. And we will be giving you the answers in the second half of today's World Tomorrow program. But at this time, I would like to offer you this free booklet, How to Have a Happy Marriage. As we're seeing on today's World Tomorrow program, making a marriage work isn't all that easy in our modern world. Basic assumptions about how to have a happy marriage and family are changing, and many are trying novel new arrangements and experimenting with alternate lifestyles that may or may not prove successful in the end. This booklet, How to Have a Happy Marriage, shows you how to make your marriage and family work and last. It shows how to build happy, stable, and successful relationships that will stand the test of time. Be sure to request your free copy. And if you're not already a subscriber, we'll also be sending you a free subscription to The Plain Truth, a magazine of understanding. This unique publication shows you how God's Word is relevant in today's modern world. Now, all of our literature is absolutely free of charge with no obligation whatsoever. And I'll be offering this literature again at the end of today's program. But now let's continue examining the three models of marriage we've been discussing and their results. Before we leap to any rash or naive conclusions, we do well to take a closer look at what's being lost in these new approaches to marriage. Let's notice that the first thing that was abandoned as our Western culture moved from what we sometimes call the old world traditional model of marriage was the position of the father as head of the family or household. His role as leader of the family was greatly diminished in this shift from the traditional to the modern family. Except in some strong ethnic traditions, such as the Italian family, which still venerates the office of the father as well as the mother, this shift was accomplished for many families by the 1960s. So the post-World War II era saw the beginning of the end of the traditional model of marriage. But are we better off for such changes? Do families work better when fathers lose their authority and leadership role? Is it good for the husband, good for the wife, and good for the children? Do families really work better that way? You know, I find it interesting how psychologists and family therapists themselves describe the new versions of marriage we were looking at earlier. Notice how psychologist Howard Kleinbell describes the modern marriage in his book, The Intimate Marriage. Modern marriage, with its robust emphasis on companionship, communication, and equality, offers unprecedented possibilities for the growth of depth relationships. But the democratic model of marriage also offers more opportunities for conflict and progressive alienation. I find such wording interesting and rather disturbing. While promising certain benefits for the modern marriage, he also predicts certain serious problems such as conflict and progressive alienation. Just how does that work? Can you have companionship and alienation in the same relationship? Is that how the modern 50-50 marriage works? And the wording in this book on marriage and family relations on personal power by the late Carl Rogers has similarly mixed reviews for person-centered marriages. Speaking of various trends in our modern world, including greater sexual freedom, Rogers writes, all these factors make a person-centered marriage or partnership more possible, but they also make marriage more risky, more open to tensions, less likely to endure. We face the dilemma that the more person-centered the sexual partnership becomes, the more it is open to disruption. And isn't that exactly what we're seeing? That modern and so-called person-centered relationships are far more risky to all involved and far less likely to endure?